here today, but Gary Crosby and Ian Rees helped me get through, I think, an hour and 40 minutes of music that we had to write for this film, and that was a lot of work. So thank God they were there to help, and just to director Victor Vu for continuing to trust me with his films. I think we're going to start with just a couple of behind-the-scenes clips. Is that what you want to do?
Yeah, that would be great. But first of all, I just want to welcome everybody to the Q&A. What a wonderful film. It was full of so much thrills. Yes, another round of applause for this collaboration. Let's see, I wanted to also introduce our guest, Christopher Wong. It's with so much delight that I talked to our special guest tonight, musical composer Christopher Wong, about his work on Detective Kien, Headless Horror, the Headless Horror, and his collaboration with the director Victor Vu on the music. But before we get into these details about the collaboration, I wanted to offer a few words about Christopher himself. Christopher is considered one of the top composers in Vietnam's film industry. He has twice won Vietnam's Oscar equivalent Golden Lotus for Best Original Score, and is a frequent collaborator of the rising generation of Asian American film directors. Again, he's worked with so many of our favorite Vietnamese American filmmakers, most notably with Ham Chun on the musical score for Journey from the Fall, and Victor Vu's earlier horror film, First Morning, which premiered at VIF in 2003, the year that the film festival was established. So there's a lot of history here between VIF and Christopher, as well as between Victor and Christopher and VIF. So speaking of history, this horror film is different in that it takes place in 19th century Vietnam, rather than the contemporary period. And I know that you and Victor worked together to not only use Vietnamese instruments, but also music from the era. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the use of the dan ca, for example, and other aspects of the Vietnamese music you incorporated into the film.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue into a little behind-the-scenes video that I prepared, if that's available. The dan ca, we found, we happened upon that sound actually while creating the music for the trailer.
Can you explain for us what the dan ca is?
Yeah, so it's a two-stringed Vietnamese instrument that's, you play it vertically and bow it. It has there's a Chinese cousin to it called the erhu, which may be familiar to some people as well. Basically, you'll hear it in many places in the film when one of the characters is getting into an eerie situation. We found that working on the trailer, what you'll see is that I did a first version where in a certain area of the trailer, Victor asked for a stringed instrument, so I just put a cello in, and it wasn't quite hitting it for him. And so when I did the next revision, I don't know where I thought of it, but I was just like, well, let's try throwing the dan ca in there and see what Victor thinks, and he really loved it. And he responded to it so positively, I kind of suggested, well, I wonder if there are places in the movie where it might work. And he really encouraged me to try that, and that was kind of how that all started and started to germinate into the different scenes in the film. Yeah. So
you have a clip of it, so you can see, or you can hear exactly what Christopher is talking about.
the same thing. Yeah, so you probably heard the difference between those two things. And this is, every aspect of filmmaking is like this. You try something, you revise it again, you keep trying to get closer and closer to it. And so once I started experimenting with it in different scenes, what I realized was that it wasn't quite strong enough to give you the big scare at the end, but it was great at just getting under your skin and making you feel a little nervous. And so structurally, what I realized is that it would work a lot of the times near the beginning of a sequence where you're just starting to go like, oh crap, here it comes. And then I let the other things take over. We've got one more clip where I'll show you a scene like that where it starts with the denko and then other things take over. And then, and you'll also get to kind of see what a film looks like while I'm working on it. Not all of the sound effects are in place yet. Some of the visual effects are missing, and that you just kind of have to imagine what's going to be there. So, let's see the next one.
Yeah.
So you heard the denko at the beginning of the scene, and it's also kind of interesting to kind of see what a movie looks like when it gets to me.
So, that was an amazing scene because of the different ways in which you are able to ratchet up the tension and the sense of dread by actually layering a lot of the sounds. Can you talk a little bit about because it's industrial sounds that are used, but then also what is it? Foley effects and a lot of infrasounds that again it create a very layered effect in order for the spectator, the viewer, to feel unnerved because the sound sounds very inhuman.
Yeah.
But so can you talk a little bit about that kind of composition?
Yeah, the interesting thing about working on scary scenes, and this is a horror scene, even though I conceive of the movie more of a genre mashup. But the interesting thing about scoring horror is that you can get really wild, and it's and the score is kind of an area where it kind of bleeds over into sound design sometimes, right? And which is interesting because you have to kind of know at least know a little bit what the sound designer is going to do, so you don't step on each other's toes, right? But the point being is that there are a lot of times when if you can find percussion that doesn't sound exactly like a drum or something musical, you know, but rather something that you can't quite place, then it almost, because of the foreignness of it, that you can't grasp onto it, it actually makes it feel more unnerving. And I actually have to admit that that banging sound in there, the industrial sound that you're referring to, I actually stole that idea from a video game called Silent Hill. I don't know if any of you play that. But, you know, for whatever reason, the day I was working on this scene, I was in that mood, and I was like, oh, that would be really fun to do something like that. When I showed the scene to my assistant, he thought it was, his remark was that, that banging sound felt like what was going on internally inside the character's head, or like, you know, his heart kind of racing or whatever. And that's another thing that you can do with horror also, is play it very psychologically. You know, a lot of times the way horror is shot, if it's shot effectively, it's about what you can see on screen and what you can't quite see, right? What's in the shadows, what's not on the frame, but is making you nervous because you can almost sense what's off the frame, whatever. And because of those reasons, when horror is shot that way, so you can't quite see everything, you can play the music a lot more psychologically, as a, you know, create the imagination of what you can't see on screen, basically.
Yeah, so I find in horror films what's really fun is this idea of what the viewer wants to know is what's also very scary. So, but that is also applicable to sound, that what you don't know is coming off screen or in terms of the sound is also very unnerving, because you want to know where that sound is coming from, and usually the sound is, again, from an unknowable space, a disembodied voice. And so there's this really intricate playing with what you know and what you don't see, or what you can't hear, or what you can't understand. That's so fun about horror films.
And you play with the, hopefully, if the filmmakers are successful, we're trying to create a feeling of unpredictability in what's going to happen, right? Because basically a well-designed scene makes you think that something's going to happen at a certain time or come from a certain place, but then it doesn't happen in the timing that you expect it to, or maybe it comes from, the hit comes from a different place than you were expecting it to on screen, right? And so Victor and I actually talked about that very, in quite a lot of detail. It's like where to, because I think what's obvious about certain types of horror, sound design, and music is that there are a lot of loud and tension-filled moments, but equally as important are the moments that are very quiet, right? And so we talked a lot about where silence was needed, or almost very, very close to silent, where it was almost dead quiet, except for a very faint sound, right? You know, I think one film that a classic horror movie that I think is just impeccable with where it places its silence, or almost complete silence, is the movie Alien by Ridley Scott, the original Alien. There are just long stretches of 3-4 minutes in that film where there's just like dripping water somewhere. It is very quiet, but you're so freaked out, you know, just because of how the pacing with which he's showing you things on screen, and you're just like, oh God, someone's gonna kill me, but I don't know where it's coming from, and you know, but it's very quiet, right? So it's horror's kind of about the combinations of surprising loudness, places where it's very quiet, combining those things in unexpected ways, and then and you know, making you, like the banging noise is a technique that's or that type of musical or sound gesture is about making you feel like something is coming at you, but you can't stop it, right? So those are all things that filmmakers try to do when they're creating suspense.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I mean, that's really fascinating. The way that sound design designers of horror films layer all these different sound and effects. And I always tell my students, you cannot watch a horror film without, you have to watch a horror film with sound. If you turn it off, it's not going to be as scary. But with your work here in this film, what you've also done is composed a musical score to hit on the emotional notes, the more melodramatic notes of the film. Can you talk a little bit about how those kinds of compositions really lend a kind of melodramatic tone to the film and soften it in certain ways and create a very textured feel to the viewing experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in the film itself. This is the second time I've seen it in the theater as an audience member, and distanced enough where it didn't feel like I was working on it. I was stressed out trying to get a deadline there or whatever. And what I experienced this time was it's fun and entertaining. It's, you know, it's a fun ride. And you know, I know I said this earlier, but as a combination of genres, it's yes, it has horror sequences in it. It's got a love story in it. It's a period drama. It's a detective movie where he's got to solve mysteries and put the clues together and everything like that. You know, it's got all those elements.
Of comedy.
Yeah, and it's got a lot of comedy in it actually too, and I think for that reason, you know, I was able to write, you know, some music like what we just heard, but then also, like you were saying, this very melodic kind of love story music, right, for the two younger characters, and which is actually my bread and butter. That's what I that's kind of what I do the most naturally. There's Victor has a film from 2019 called Matbek. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's called Dreamy Eyes on Netflix. But yeah, that kind of sweeping melodrama love music is kind of what I gravitate. Yeah, it's my signature. That's what comes most easily to me. And so it was really fun to have a movie where I could do both things. But what I will say is true about I always love comparing horror and comedy films, actually, even though people think they're opposites. But they're both thought of as genre types of films, but the most successful ones have stories about the human experience in them, right? And so for a horror film or a suspense film, the most effective ones are actually about tragedy and sadness and human loss, right? And so, right, which is what we saw in the conclusion here with the shaman actually having to see his family sacrifice and all these things, right? There has to be something that the characters have at stake that delve into tragedy or loss for the horror elements to go beyond just adrenaline, right? And then at the same time, the younger characters, they have to have this love story for there to be any stakes or any, you know, anything for there to be gravitas to that relationship, right?
Yeah, and so the music adds to it, the characterizations add to it, but for me, what sustains my love and passion for horror is this idea of the monster. The best monsters are the ones that are revolting, but also very sympathetic. And so I can see how with the shaman's origin story, you were trying to pull, and both you and Victor were trying to pull it into this kind of sense that he's been wronged,
Yeah.
and that his own story is tragic, and so there's a pull for an emotional, what is it, identification
Yeah.
with this young boy who's witnessed
Yeah.
this tragedy.
Yeah.
So, and that also, that witnessing fuels the retribution.
Mhm.
And so it brings up all these emotions, human emotions about justice and
Yeah.
loss.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was a lot of fun to write music too. I think it was really well written in the script, and I just kind of went along with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we definitely enjoyed it. So we can open up to Q&A if there's any other questions. How are you?
Can I ask two questions?
Yeah.
They're kind of related. One is, I have outside voice, so this might be like way too much. One is, I was there in 2003, first morning.
Oh, you were there. Oh,
and
wow.
Al Chan and
Okay.
Charlie Nguyen and all those guys. So
Yeah.
did you find that writing music for Vietnamese American directors have like pointed your composition, your music composition in a certain direction, or it would have developed normally anyway?
Well, it certainly pointed my career towards Vietnam because they basically all started working over there and took me with them, more or less, right? And I think in some ways it's influenced my use of my occasional use of Vietnamese instruments, but the style with which they're making films doesn't always necessitate, for example, completely traditional Vietnamese music, right? So I think yes and no. I think it's a bit of a mix, because you can hear that I'm drawing from a lot of traditional Western influences also, and they're fine with that, and they actually temp track their films that way. I don't know if y'all in the audience know what a temp track is, but sometimes they'll put music from other soundtracks in while they're editing the film, just to give a sense of what direction to go in, and that's very typical. But and you had a second question, I'll say.
Before the film you mentioned like your film composition teacher.
Oh, yeah.
As a teacher myself, I would like really love it with my students remember like one thing from my class for a whole year and then come up with one thing.
Yeah.
Do you remember one thing you learned from that class that is still with you today?
From Jerry, wow. There are like so many I remember a lot of things about him, just like funny moments or whatever, but I think if I had to say there was one thing I could grab is he kept on saying that there was no one way to do things, right? Like just over and over in our class. He was working on Star Trek 9 at the time, and basically our assignments were to try to score scenes from that, and then he would show us what he did, which was always better, right? But then he would always point out, like, you don't have to try to go for the ship. You could try to go for the planet instead, or like, he would just say this is just one way to do it. There's a dozen different legitimate ways, And really all it boils down to is what that combination of the composer and the director are, is where's that area where they agree, right? And then that's what ends up being right for that film. But if it was a different composer and a different director, there's a ton of different ways to do it. Yeah. So that's one of the takeaways I got from Jerry.
Question over here.
Question?
First of all, congratulations on it. A great score. That was amazing.
Well, thank you.
The question is, in regards to creating a score, what genre is your favorite and most fun to do? Is it horror? And if so, why? Because I would think it would be. That's why I'm asking the question.
Horror's fun, but it's not my top passion. I love doing heartfelt dramas with a little bit of melancholy in them. One of my early landmark film scores that I worked on with Hamtran in 2005 or 6 or something, 2005, was a film called Journey from the Fall, and that's very indicative of what I like to do. And Victor has 2 movies that are kind of right in that pocket. One of them I mentioned before is called Dreamy Eyes on Netflix. And then there's another film we did in 2015 called Yellow Flowers in the Green Grass, which is another kind of very heartfelt drama with a little bit of heartache. I don't think that one ever got picked up for streaming in the United States, but I don't know if you know the composer like Alexander Desplat, but he a lot of the dramas that he works on in Hollywood are kind of the things that I would love to do. Or any of like Thomas Newman's dramas, like Shawshank Redemption or American Beauty or some of those films. You know, it's like that's really kind of my passion, is doing that. But I've done romantic comedies, children's adventure, you know, just almost every different genre, and because that's what the job is, you know, is just to be flexible. And a good film composer should be able to express any emotion that is told in a story. But I think, yeah, the heartfelt dramas are my favorite to work on.
Time for one more question.
Jenny, you already know me.
I do, but I do have a burning question. I don't know if you can answer this, and obviously all directors are different, but I'm just curious, because you've worked with, you know, obviously a lot of Vietnamese American directors, and as well as Vietnamese local directors in Vietnam.
Yeah.
So what could you talk a little bit about, like, sort of the biggest difference, if there are any, or you know, if there's a difference in working with a Vietnamese local director versus like a diasporic Vietnamese director?
That's a tricky question. I think that
Spill the beans.
I'm trying to think, like, I know that the answer that would be the most interesting is that they have stylistic differences, but I don't know that that's necessarily, I don't know if I can make a generalization about that, because it just varies from one individual to another in terms of the directors. I think that, I think it's more that when I work with a local Vietnamese director, because I've never lived over there and I've actually never visited, developing the language for communication takes a little bit more time, and sometimes they don't understand how much what parts of their culture I don't know, right? So with someone like Victor, who grew up over here but has been living over in Vietnam for the past 20 years, and you know, knows my perspective as an American, but also knows the culture over there. He is very quick to fill in the blanks. Like, if he knows there's something that I wouldn't understand, that the audience, you know, either needs, or else there's something in the story that I wouldn't get right away because I don't live in Vietnam. He can pinpoint that very quick and just point that out, right? I think with a local Vietnamese director, sometimes I'll get confused and they don't understand why I'm confused. And then after talking it out a little bit, they get, oh, he doesn't get it. I have to explain it a different way, you know? So I think that's the most interesting thing about working internationally, is that, you know, like, for example, I'm working with a director right now, and he's not a fluent English speaker, and so whenever we do a video chat, he has a translator with him, and we do the best we can. But he actually writes, he types in English very clearly, and so we're we're trying to figure out, like, should we actually continue meeting on video, or is it actually clearer to just do it over email? Or, you know, I think communication in general with a creative collaborator, it's, as you know, it's different with every person, right? And And so when you work with a director for the first time, especially with one that's in a different country, a lot of the skill behind your job is just learning how they want to communicate with you creatively, and hoping that you translate that into music as accurately as possible.
So on that note, I would like to thank our guest. Oh, one more question? Do we have enough?
Kind of out of time.
Sorry.
Come talk to me.
I'll talk to you after. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that. But so I want to congratulate you on such a wonderful score for a wonderful film, and thank you all for coming and staying back for this Q&A. I hope to see you for the rest of the film festival. And so on that note, how about another round of applause for the film and for Christopher Wong.